You are watching part 1 of a waterfall table build. Enjoy. One of the first steps in building this table is cleaning all the bark out of any knot holes and making sure there's no loose pieces of wood where there had been a branch. Here I'm chiseling out some pieces of wood that's been rotted. Branch died and water got into the hole where the branch eventually fell off. This needs to be done so that when you pour your epoxy, there's nothing floating in it and your epoxy has good wood to adhere to. And when I run this wood through the planer, it won't explode and shoot pieces of wood out. In this next step, I'll be planing these boards. First, I'm going to attach the board to a flat board and then run that through the planer and get one side flat. I'll hot glue it to this known piece of flat wood, and then the planer actually only cuts on one side, so I'll run this through the planer, get one side flat, and then I can just remove it from the board and flip it over, and the other side will be flat, so when I run it through the planer, it will make it flat on the other side. So we're kind of cutting the ends off, taking a little bit off each end as we push it through. That's why when it won't feed into the planer, it's actually in the void here, because this is a kind of a dip in here, so it doesn't touch the rollers inside the planer. I'll check my piece with the long level just to see if there's any voids that I have to remove yet. But that's going to be about it for flattening one side. Okay, now we're going to, we've got our surface flat. Now we are going to take this board off of our flat board on the bottom. We're going to flip this board over. But first we have to get it off of here, which could be easier said than done. First I'm going to go along and try to cut a little bit. could use my heat gun. I might have to, because I'm not sure. There's other tools that you could use for this that would save you a ton of time, but I don't have any of them. Just make do with what you have. So we've got one side cut. Now we just need the other side cut. But now we're going to have to get our glue off of here, so we still have a flat surface. And this seems to work pretty good. So you may want to use your whatever you got to use is what you have to use. So that works good. Now we're going to take our board. We have a perfectly flat side on this side. We don't have to put it back on here because we've already got a flat side. So me bad. Now we're just going to run it through the planer as is. I'm going to get the hot glue off of it. Otherwise we'll have a hot mess on our rollers on our planer. So this is how this is going to work. Just get it. Just take these off. So we're not sticking that all into our planer because we'll gum stuff up in there, you know. Might not gum it up to be usable, but it'll definitely, in the long run. It takes a couple minutes to get this. We've got some dead wood here that I am going to be chopping out of here because when this goes through the planer, it's probably going to explode. So stuff like that, I'm gonna get all the loose stuff out. And this here is going to be filled with epoxy. Look at that. That's all wood that was, the tree had a branch on it that had died and it bled way back in. No, I don't have to get way down in there. This is even bark in here. I'll work on this more later, but for now, so you don't have to sit through me doing all this. I'll probably fast forward this anyways, and if I don't, I apologize. Okay. piece is going to be a little lighter now because we have removed the flattening board. But we still have a good chunk. This rigid planer, it's not my only planer, but I have a 735 DeWalt also. But I don't know if you can see that in there. It has a little ball bearing under there that shows you how thick of a piece you're going to take off. Once you, here, I'll adjust it on camera here and you should be able to see it. Once it contacts the wood, of course, I don't have it in there far enough to hit our, once it contacts the wood, our little gauge will go up like that, you see. So that gives you kind of an idea of how it works. Now it's time to start making the form. I'm going to make that out of melamine, MDF, whatever you want to call it. And first I have to cut the pieces and then I'll be screwing them together and siliconing, lining with Tyvek tape, and you'll see all that. I'll be using my Craig track saw accessory with my rigid skill saw. Well, I screwed up my first cut because my track saw guide slid. I didn't have it clamped down. So it's back to the drawing board again. And I'm running out of wood, so luckily I got this one cut perfectly. So
Here I'm just cutting my piece to length, cutting the end off of the piece that I ripped. Now I'm over at the table saw. I'm going to cut some 4-inch strips to make the sides of the form. You'll notice my faithful companion there, my shop companion, Willow. Then I would pre-drill the holes so that when I ran the screws through it didn't split the melamine. Here I'm going to be using my Craig pocket hole jig, and I'm going to drill holes all along the side, probably about every foot, so that I can attach this board from the top. Here I brought my form pieces in the house. That's where I'm going to be pouring the epoxy. It's a dust-free room. I'll clean all the parts with alcohol so that when I put the tape on, it'll stick real well, and also the silicone. Here I'm using Tyvek tape to seal off the entire board, and that will keep the epoxy from sticking to the wood. Now I'll start to assemble the entire table. First putting the tape on, and then I'll put silicone on the bottom of each piece as I put it before I screw it down. That seals it up really good. I am going to have to cut this part of the video short because I'm way over on my hours here on this video. It's getting to be quite a long project. Here I'm back out in the garage. I'm going to get the sides of each board nice and flat round with a joiner. Here I'm taking my long level and I'm going to lay it down on the flat edge of my board just to make sure that it's good and flat. Here I'm cleaning up the live edge of my board so my epoxy will stick to it. I'll use my Dremel tool to get inside where the knots are. Get that cleaned out good. Now I'll use my grinder with a flap disc on it to clean the bark side edge so that I get a good contact for adhering the epoxy. Here I've taken another board and I'm going to rip 4-inch pieces off of it so I can use it for extensions to make the table wider after. Ripping these thick boards with the Sasquatch skill saw, 10 1/4 inch, makes easy work of it. Now I'll be running those extension boards through the planer to get them the exact thickness as the original boards that I'll be using when I pour the epoxy. And then I'll be running them through the table saw just to get them all exact and perfectly straight. Here I'm waxing up my joiner table with just some car wax so that the boards slide through easier. And now it's on to jointing each side of these boards to make them perfectly flat for glue up. It's almost time to pour the epoxy, but first I'm going to seal all the edges and all the knots in the wood, and that will deter any air bubbles from forming from those areas. And now it's almost time to pour. I've got the boards in the form, and all I need to do now is mix up the epoxy. You've been watching part 1 of this project, and part 2 will come out shortly. Stay tuned. Like and subscribe. Follow. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful day. If you have any questions, leave them in the comments and I'll get to them as soon as I can. Or just message me. You can also log on to my website at spikehornwoods.com. Also on Facebook, Spikehorn Woods.